their tagline being humanizing, financial services. And they have been such a great help as well to our community in terms of offering really good rates and special rates for our Brands for Good winners. So today, Brands for Good, we have evolved from just a movement. Now we are a non-profit organization registered in Singapore. We have over 300 SMEs involved, in positive impact enterprises across Singapore and obviously Southeast Asia. Now we have expanded our reach beyond Singapore, and we really want to, at the end, expand it further to cover ASEAN. And how we expanded beyond Singapore actually is we have also signed an MOU with the ASEAN CSR Network and also Ariba, and I think Thomas from the chair for Ariba has been here. And if you have not been part of Ariba, I would definitely highly recommend that you join. The fees are not very expensive, and it will be able to enable you to join us in more of the activities organized with Ariba on a ASEAN level. Okay. So what is Ariba in short? They are a network to promote responsible and inclusive business activities. And in collaboration with them, we have also adopted their charter. And their vision is actually to describe the future that we want to create, and that future that we are working toward is a world where business do well by doing good. And they want to create a world where businesses are being responsible and inclusive, in whatever that they do, in their policies and how they run their businesses. And that will be the epitome of their successful story in that sense. And not only that, to be profitable, but then also have a powerful and positive impact to the triple bottom line, which is profit, people, and planet. And that really is very in line with Brands for Good's vision, and that's how we found the synergy to link up and to tie up. So this is just to let you know and show you who are the people that are really working very hard behind the scenes. These are the organizing team. And of course, we have Professor Su Waning here. He's our chief judge that is also part of the IIPCC main board. He also sits on the main board, and he has been raising and supporting our event for the past 3 years. So, what's the big idea about all this Brands for Good and why we're so passionate about doing this? Why we come together and the whole idea also sprung up from Ellen being we had this idea from how in the US there's a lot of emphasis on doing good, and they even have recognition for awards to say that businesses that have successfully commercialized IP but has a positive impact for humanitarian good purposes. And so we adopted that idea. We say, hey, Asia needs something like this similarly as well. So that was how we marry intellectual property, and we recognize every business will have some form of intellectual property, be your brands, your trademarks, your patents, your fintech towards whatever technology that you are adopting, or your intangible assets, and marrying it with the business angle, and how you can actually use it for your ESG initiatives and in terms of the different categories. So later on, I will also show you what are the categories that your as a business Brands for Good can nominate. And we categorize it to a few categories, and you can always, I think what we always emphasize is you can always find a positive angle, be it, how you internally, manage your staff, or how you internally do business with your vendors, and how you portray your products towards the consumer as well. So these are just some of the ESG framework that we talk about. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, and these are some of the broad issues that are usually covered under the framework. And as Brands for Goods, we hope to highlight some of these categories and showcase companies that have successfully placed and have a positive impact in some of these categories. And hopefully, these stories will actually inspire others to follow in the same footsteps. So, as I mentioned, Brands for Good serves to inspire every business to become a purposeful brand and not just profit all the way, right? So our mission has a threefold focus: to help good brands differentiate effectively and create transformative value by their intangible assets. That's the first one. And to make waves with ASEAN Brands for Good stories so as to inspire the world. And thirdly, to build a global community of responsible and inclusive businesses. So, one person sounding it, it's not. It's better to have a conglomerate and group of voice banded together. That will make a more bigger impact than if just one person is clapping. So moving on to what our 4 C's proposition are. One is we like to promote competencies. Competencies, in the area of businesses and have mindset changes, have the courage to change the way that you are doing things today. If there are areas to improve on, companies will not hesitate or will be bold to make the necessary changes so that in terms of impact, they are making more positive impact. For example, if you've not tracked your carbon footprint, we also have a program that we are collaborating to enable companies to help calculate their carbon footprint and to reduce it, over the years, things like that. Secondly, community, help build a tribe of purposeful businesses. And so within this community that we are building, hopefully we bring together businesses that are of the same mindset. And with that value being an anchor, it would help them to create a community and also to exchange ideas and also perhaps collaboration moving forward, because you do want to collaborate with partners that are of the same mindset. And the the third point is capital. So not just having a community as Brands for Good, we also try to push for support financially. So we are setting up a fund called Impact Investments within the region, hopefully to gather investors that are more focused on ESG focused companies to invest in. And fourth, we want to build champions. We want to raise champions for good as change makers. So I think I've run through this already. Competencies. So as part of competencies as well, we also want to see, that's why we have webinars and all that, right? As part of our community activities. And we want to increase the competencies and knowledge base of our members. And as part of that, IPCC is also pushing for the agenda of IP commercialization, and we just had a workshop as well to explain and encourage businesses to start thinking about their IP commercialization strategy, not just a business strategy, but also incorporate IP, have the underlying knowledge in terms of how you can maximize your intangible assets value, and also to build and raise the valuation of your company. So these are some of the competencies that we are also hoping to generate and to upkeep. So the second thing, as I mentioned, community, just to give you some of the other supporting organizations that we're working with. Of course, we've mentioned Ariba. We're also working with Enterprise Societies, Enterprise Singapore Society, FinTech Academy, recently the Franchising and Licensing Association, which ties in really closely with our agenda on IP commercialization, the Asian Development Bank, and Project WeCare. And of course, we do welcome more collaboration. So if any of you all have any other ideas or any contacts, we would really welcome such contacts. Capital, to give you some examples of what we have been up to, we are working towards, with our partners here, as you can see, towards setting up a MAS licensed Brands for Good Impact Fund. That's in the works. And so hopefully at the same time, we're also working to forge more co-investing partners to support our Brands for Good companies at various stages of their growth. And lastly, champions. Of course, as part of the Brands for Good Awards category, we do have categories where we actually recognize champions. These are companies that are leading and paving the way, for what they are doing. And we hope that, we will be able to have more and more companies, be in this kind of category. And this is really what we hope to raise and encourage. So this is an overview of our ceremony last year. And as you all know, usually we will have a very gala and exclusive dinner that we usually hold at Marina Bay Sands. But last year, because of the pandemic, this is as gala as we can get. So we even had Mr. Edwin Tong and Miss Sim Ann came back to officiate our ceremony. So what we did was we had a ASEAN CSR conference in collaboration with Ariba that ran for a whole full day, and then we did our Brands for Good Awards ceremony in one part of the day. So this was some screenshots of what we were up to last year. And these are just to give you a flavor of, if you join us, these are some of our past activities that we have run for the community. We had in conversation with Minister Chan Chun Sing, and these are some of the participation that happened last year. So even despite the pandemic, we really pushed and kudos to the team behind it to organize such events. Nothing will stop us from moving forward and giving the support that we can for the community. This one was earlier this year, where we actually officially launched our 2021 Brands for Good. Basically the next coming award, 2021-2022. Where we actually have Prof. Lim Xiong Guan and Ms. Lim Hui Hua share about the role of government and business. So we just want to give a shout out as well to our sponsors, Aba Consulting, FinTech Academy, Sansan, 01, Harry Elias. They have all been supporting us as well in the background. So we really thank you for our sponsors. These are the other networking events that we have previously done when there was no lockdown. So really hope that things will improve and we can continue to have in-person meetings. So we had a CEO networking session with the Cambodian Women's Entrepreneurs Association. We had also a series of CEO luncheons with up close with some influential figures. And it was really good since we can have like an in-person, sort of a casual chat over lunch, which enabled us to ask questions that perhaps in the bigger setting we couldn't. Of course, we had our launch, previous year's launch at Brands for Good in SPH, and we also hosted a Cambodian Chamber of Commerce networking session with President Kit Ming. This was a dialogue that we did with Josephine Teo on managing manpower and transformative environment. This was in 2019. So those were just snapshots of some of the events that we did. So how can you actually join us and be part of this? I think nominations, we want to really encourage you. If you have not nominated yourself, you've attended some of our webinars, highly encourage you to join and nominate yourself. The nominations fee is very low. It's just enough actually to just help us cover our admin support. And if you have already nominated yourselves for the previous years, we have winners who have returned and re-nominated themselves year after year because they do see the value in the exposure that they get. So we highly encourage you to do that. And if you don't, if you have other people that you think may benefit from this, please do encourage them to nominate themselves as well. You can find all the information in relation to the categories on our Brands for Good website. Secondly, sponsorship. I think this is very, very important because in order for us to continue, we really need funding. So really hope and urge, if any of y'all, even if as businesses, if you really believe in the cause that we are fighting for and we are pushing for, we would really welcome more sponsors so that we can actually expand and do more for the community. So anytime, please talk to Glenn, us or anyone on team. Investments. So as I mentioned, we are already considering a Brands for Good Impact Fund. If any of you are a angel investor or in the funding space, we will welcome collaborations as well. So please do talk to us. Partnerships, if you are part of any other association or organizations, please also let us know. We will welcome partnerships and to organize activities together and to expand our reach. And fifth will be community leadership. We're all volunteers, by the way. We're not paid. Myself, Alan, Glenn, and the team. We're all volunteering on a volunteer basis. So if you have the capacity and you want to be involved somehow, please do let us know as well. And to of course lend your, if you're not planning Brands for Good, I think lending your support in terms of what you can bring knowledge-wise and all that, we will also welcome that. Yeah, that's for the community. Okay, I think we're almost done.
Okay, yeah, no time already.
Yeah. Sorry, you need to keep time. I wasn't keeping time.
Okay, time.
Okay. Back to you, Glenn.
All right, thank you, Esther. So sorry, we really need to sort of maintain our time. I'll quickly pass on the mic over to Maybank, and then after that to Thomas. Both Kwok Eng and Thomas, I hope that you don't mind. We try to keep it within 3 minutes so that we have a quick discussion and we can quickly dive into the conversation. And I'm very excited to hear Vasuki. Right, Kwok Eng, wow, I see your screen.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot, Glenn. So my name is Kwok Eng. I'm from Maybank, Singapore. So currently I'm heading a team of SME bankers in Maybank. Right. And as briefly mentioned by Esther, Maybank and Brands for Good have been partners for a while now. I think it's coming to 4 years. So we are very happy. I think the journey is very rewarding, right? Even though as a sponsor, we see a lot of good impact that was done on the small and medium enterprise as well as the companies around the region, right? So without further ado, let me just quickly brief some of the overview for Maybank, right? Okay, so just to give you a context, in case this is the first time you're hearing from a Maybank representative, we are the largest financial service group in Malaysia. Our market capitalization stands at 32 billion, right? Our total assets is 2.67 billion. When it comes to staff strength over the region, we have 43,000 of Maybankers. Our establishment is across 18 countries. And of course, there are 18 branches in Singapore. In Malaysia itself, we have 354 branches. Okay, so this is something new. Maybank Maybank Singapore has come out with a Maybank Momentum grant, right? Right. The purpose is actually to amplify our social efforts that we are looking to empower charities, which are essentially the stakeholders in the community, to provide critical services to the vulnerable groups. So who is it for? So for a start, we are officially launching the Maybank Momentum Grant last month in May, right, to support small charities serving unmet needs in Singapore. So this is the first of its kind. It's a recyclable grant in Singapore, and there will be master classes organized to help build up the charities' capacities. So Maybank has also specially designed a special banking package for charities called the Maybank Community Package, which offers preferential rates and benefits to their unique needs. All right, so this is something new from Maybank. So we are doing our part to help the charities as well, just to make sure that the good cause that they are doing, we are affirming them and we are supporting them. Okay, so with that, let me just briefly touch on some of the partnership programs we have with the government in Singapore to offer support to SME. So that includes a working capital loan, temporary bridging loan, as well as a trade loan. I shall not dwell too much into it because I can see that most of the participants are really a repeat audience, right? So you probably, this is not the first time you're hearing it, right? So just to briefly give you a very quick overview, for working capital loan, it is available to SME. It's currently capped at 300K. There's no collateral needed. But in the event that you need a bigger loan, we have this loan called the temporary bridging loan. In short, we call them a TBL, right? So this loan goes up to a maximum of 3 million, right? No collateral needed as well, right? And of course, you are someone who deals beyond the shores of Singapore. You may also want to consider trade financing with us. right? So the limit of trade financing goes up to 10 million, but of course, do have a word with us, myself as well as my team, right? So we will help you to assess to see what is the most feasible limit for you. Right. So with that, that is really quick, right? So with that, I just want to touch on that we also offer a commercial property financing as well. So basically, if let's say you're buying a property, you're refinancing a property, it's a commercial property for your own use or for investment, right? Do come to us because this is one of our strengths, right? We deal with HDB shop house, we deal with office unit, retail unit, anything at all. So come to us, have a word with my team as well as myself, right? And we'll advise you what is the best way to actually finance your property, right? So with that, I shall leave you my contact, right? My name is the bottom of the tree, is Tan Kuo Eng, right? As well as my teammates Helmut, April. Feel free to take a screenshot or take a photo of these contact details so they can reach out to us if you need any of our offerings, right? So that's it. Right, Glenn, over to you.
Thanks, Koing. Thomas,
problem.
sorry. Can I pass the screen on to you quickly because I'm really mindful of the time and we're quite behind. 3 minutes. Hey, Thomas. Wow.
Good day to everyone. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm just going to do a very sorry. So, okay, I just want to give a little bit of the description on Areba. I have to thank Esther for mentioning it, and you heard about it. Just to say, this is an initiative of the ASEAN CSR Network together with ASEAN Business Advisory Council. We both are ASEAN entities meant to do this. So we are trying to get companies to sign on. Why are we doing this? Is basically because, in summary, the world has two problems. One, there are a lot of things that have gone wrong, and the COVID-19 shows things has to change. And change is taking place. There's a lot of pressure on governments. The corruption has gone up. The global trends are there. And a lot of ASEAN businesses are under pressure to comply with the green environmental factors, social factors. The EU is going to come out with, they're supposed to come out with guidelines on mandatory human rights due diligence, move to September. These will all have impacts on supply chains and companies. And so rather than let the rest of the world take leadership and we be a follower, I think the answer is that we are trying to use Areba to get small, medium-sized, those in which comprise 99% of the businesses to also be involved and not just be a taker involved. So what we have done is we said this is a code where all businesses should work on values and principles, which Esther has mentioned about ESG, but we talk about principles of values, and it talks about accountability, transparency, ethical behavior, respect for stakeholder, respect for rule of law, respect for international norms, and to treat people with respect, dignity, and fairness. So if we have these values, and what are the subject areas? So we have actually identified subject areas which every business has to comply with, already happening with stock exchanges making it mandatory on listed companies. The laws in Europe is taking up to make all these mandatory and requirements to report. So we are trying to get our companies to also do it and be prepared for this. So in essence, we have got this objective, which basically is to make a world where businesses do well by doing good. All business has to be prosperous, profitable, but at the same time, we don't make other people poorer. We make the world better. I think that's the objective. So one of the projects, initiatives is on sustainable procurement, and I urge you all to join. And with this introduction, I hope you just contact Glenn, myself, or anything to do it. I have just made my short presentation, which I could sometimes speak for 30 minutes in less than 3 minutes. So thank you.
All right, well done. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Okay, so I can finally breathe and we are sort of a little bit more on time and appreciate.
I recognize that Mr. Shastry is the most important player here, not me. So, thank you.
Right. Okay. So as both Esther and Thomas have shared, Brands for Good nominations is now open, right? So you can go and visit online at www.brandsforgood.asia. Nomination fees are as I mentioned, is really cover the secretariat and the administrative costs. It's I think $500. If you are a Maybank customer, that means if you own a Maybank account, you can get a 50% discount, right? So that's actually a hack. I'll share it not often as often as I can. The other thing is, of course, the Areba membership. It's a new entity, right? It's less than about a year old. We're also asking businesses to join if you're keen. Membership fee starts at $200. It's actually very small. It covers micro enterprises as well as an inclusive business alliance. It spans the full gamut of businesses from micro businesses all the way to listed companies as well. I hope you do join the family and do consider joining the family as well. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to pass over the mic to Mr. Vasuki Shastry. Vasuki Shastry is actually a former journalist with SPH and has also worked at the International Monetary Fund and MAS, Standard Bank, and is also currently serving as an associate with the Asia Pacific fellow at Chatham House. Vasuki recently wrote a book, Has Asia Lost It? Great title, by the way. It's catchy and then I think helps pick up the hot titles. So over to you, Mr. Shastry. Right.
Thank you so much, Glenn, and thank you so much for inviting me today. I want to start with offering some advance apologies. We had a major storm in Washington, D.C. tonight, as a result of which connectivity has become a challenge. So if I, for some reason, lose my connection, let me assure you that I will come back in short order. But I thought I'd put this right up because I had a call before this where I lost the connection twice. And I just wanted to be sure that you don't think that I've disappeared. Now, I want to also start, my publisher is in the meeting. So Hui Yen and Yi Hong are here. So just to be sure that they report back to head office, I do want to show the book to all of you. It came out in March. I know Singapore was going through lockdown. It used to be available in Kinokuniya and all the bookstores, but I'm sure you can order it from the World Scientific Publishing website or from Amazon. So having done my bit in marketing the book, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time, and I know Glenn mentioned it's a provocative title. So I just wanted to provide some of the context as to why I wrote this book. And, I think a legitimate question that has been raised in other quarters is, how much do I know Asia for me to feel, that I'm an authority? And since I have not lived in Asia for many years, what kind of sources have I drawn upon in writing this book? So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and then just dive into the major themes of the book. As Glenn mentioned, I was a journalist in Asia for 18 years. I spent 6 memorable years as a journalist in Singapore in the 1990s with Business Times. And happy to see SPH is going from strength to strength and will soon become a public trust. I worked in Jakarta for Business Times. I was there during the Asian financial crisis. Of course, watched the fall of President Suharto. I then worked for the IMF. I was an Asia Pacific spokesperson. I took time off from the IMF to work for MAS. That was an incredible experience, working with T.M. Lee, who was then chairman of MAS during my time. And, both at the IMF and Standard Chartered Bank, I used to be in Asia literally every month. I traveled extensively across the region. So, this book came out of this feeling that I got, particularly in the last 5 years. At Standard Chartered Bank, for example, I used to run their CSR programs globally. So I would go into a country in Asia. Much of the morning I would spend in 5-star hotels. I would meet corporate clients. And there used to be one type of conversation about Asia. In all of those conversations, really saying Asia is booming, Asia is the future, 21st century is going to be the Asian century. Then I would step aside in my other role as head of sustainability to go and meet with NGOs, to go and see community projects for myself. Standard Chartered used to support a lot of philanthropy on avoiding blindness, in providing education for disadvantaged teenage girls. And then I glimpsed a completely different part of Asia, which both for someone who's involved in business, someone who's in the policy making circuit, I think you don't get an opportunity when you go to Bangladesh, when you go to India, even when you go to distant parts of China, as I have been, far away from all the glitz and the glamour of Beijing and Shanghai. You step aside, you go to, northeast provinces in China, you come away with a very, very different sense of the kind of challenges that ordinary people are facing. And then I got the strong sense that their concerns, their aspirations, and their challenges are not being highlighted really in this very, very glamorous side of Asia that all of us see and all of us, kind of support. Shining Asia, rising Asia, that's the narrative that's been driven in the last 20, 30 years. And that narrative had two parts. The first part, of course, is the rise of Japan and the rise of the four tiger countries, which includes Singapore. And that was the original Asian miracle, which people are still talking about. I mean, that was spectacular by any economic or historic yardstick. The rise of Japan and the rise of the four tigers. Even today, I think in the economic history books anywhere in the world are really case studies on how countries with very limited natural resources, with very little education, income levels, when they started on their journey in the 1960s, were able in a matter of a generation become very developed countries and high income countries. Right? So my book is not about Japan, it's not about Korea, it's not about Taiwan, it's not about Hong Kong, and it's not about Singapore. So I just wanted to place that first on the table. So everything I talk about developing Asia. And if you read my book, Bilahari Kausikan, who's Singapore's former top diplomat, who's now chairman of the Middle East Institute, says rightly in the jacket of the book that Asia is an abstraction. That there are many Asias, and Asia is a complex continent. And I think we do a disservice by talking about shining Asia and rising Asia, because Singapore is shining, Japan is shining, certainly parts of China are shining, but there are many, many other parts of Asia which are facing severe economic, political, and social challenges, which does not receive enough attention, right? So people outside of Asia make this very wrong assumption that, everything is okay with Asia. This is going to be the continent that's going to lead the global economy in the next century. And, they may well turn out to be, these assumptions may well turn out to be true. So, but what I try to do in the book, focus on developing Asia. And what I mean by developing Asia is I include China, India, and Indonesia, and I include pretty much Southeast Asia, South Asia. And so you look at the Philippines, look at Thailand, look at Malaysia, certainly look at India and Bangladesh and the other countries. And look at it from the perspective of, right? If I looked at this from the perspective of economic growth alone, I would write a book saying, economic growth in the region is so high, so everything must be okay in terms of income distribution, in terms of reducing inequality, in terms of dealing with the environment, dealing with corruption. And that's the wrong assumption that many people make. I had described the group that is promoting Asia. With due apologies to anyone who's a member of that group in this room. I describe them as the thought leadership mafia, which really includes journalists, academics, business leaders, political leaders, policy makers, and really who've got who've got a shared interest in building up this rising Asia narrative. And they're doing a disservice. They're doing a disservice mainly because, you know, the final destination of Asia may well be fully developed, shining Asia. But I argue that the journey that these countries are embarking on at this point in time is becoming difficult. It's becoming difficult for three reasons. First reason is the secret sauce for the rise of Asia certainly is globalization. It's globalization, trade and investment, which explains the rise of Japan, explains the rise of the four tiger economies. And when China opened up in 1979, which was followed by Vietnam and India, it is globalization, trade and investment, which has been the growth drivers for the region. The region has been very open in terms of trade and investment. It has allowed foreign investors to come in, to build industries. That has helped in upgradation of skills. That has helped in building export-driven economies, which partially explains why growth in the region has been so consistently high for so long. But at the same time, so you had one phase when all of this high rates of growth was translating into real outcomes for people, right? I'm not talking about all of you gentlemen and ladies on this call, who I'm sure belong to a very privileged majority in Singapore. But there are millions, hundreds of millions upon people all over Asia who are living on, subpar incomes, who are struggling to make ends meet. And even if you're in the middle class in these parts of Asia today, one test that all of us have, and I'm sure you will share this as well, in my case, I grew up in India. And my parents' aspiration for me and my sisters was, invest in education in such a way that, my life and my social outcomes will certainly be better than that of my parents' generation. And I think, in many parts of Asia, certainly we've seen that in Singapore, the outcomes for many, many years has been on an individual level. One can say, regardless of what your profession is, on an individual level, many people could proudly say that I have benefited from this economic boom in the region. But if you look at economic statistics in the last decade, particularly in developing Asia, including China, including India, including Indonesia, income inequality is rising and social mobility is stalling. Now, what do I mean by social mobility is stalling? Let me just give you two examples. The first is university education. I think we all come from a generation where our parents believed that we had to go to university, get a good degree in order to get a good career, a good job, and able to build our version of the Asian dream. But what we are seeing in many parts of Asia today, and the data is pretty obvious, you have a surplus of university graduates. Right? So this is called the massification of higher education. This is predominant in China, it's predominant in Hong Kong, it's predominant in India, Indonesia, and I'm sure the same data exists in Malaysia and Thailand. So what happens when you've got an army of educated people who all have college degrees? Some of them are from very reputed institutions. Some of them are from college factories. So everyone gets a degree. And in this competitive economy, they are not able to find quality jobs, right? So, I cite two examples in the book, examples from China, where you've had in the last 5 years, you now have data where you've got significant increase in number of college graduates, but at the same time, they take up rate. Their ability to get employed is falling. So many of them are underemployed. Many of them are doing, part-time jobs in the gig economy. They're not living up to their full potential. In India, the Indian Railways 3 years ago advertised clerical level jobs. So I think they had about 100 open positions. They got 1.2 million applications from college graduates. And we're seeing the similar thing happening in the rest of Asia. So, what happens when you've got a surplus of college graduates who are unable to find jobs, and these people are educated, they know how to use social media, and you're beginning to see some evidence of this. What you have, in short order, you get social unrest. So what we've seen in Hong Kong over the past year, what we've seen in Thailand, and certainly in Myanmar after the coup, the great number of college graduates who have been leading the social protests. And in Thailand last year, you had similar protests, again at the vanguard, where university graduates, many of whom were unemployed. Certainly in Hong Kong, and I think Hong Kong is a sobering lesson of an advanced economy which has not been able, mainly because of the distortions in the property market in Hong Kong, where land is scarce, land is controlled by the government, and they haven't built enough public housing. So you can be a college graduate from a good reputed university in Hong Kong today, but you're not going to be able to make enough money in order to rent a decent apartment and start a family. So, it's these pressures that the region really needs to watch out to, because, what happened 10 years ago in the Arab Spring had mainly to do with the fact that many of the countries that faced revolutions in the Arab world had a surplus of college graduates who were unemployed. And if you're not able over a period of time to ensure proper employment and social mobility to this group, surely you're going to have social trouble. And you're already beginning to see this in Asia, right? So I don't need to overstate my case. And the important thing to place in context is the pandemic. Now, I started writing the book before the pandemic. In fact, I started writing the book in March 2019, almost a full year before the global lockdown. And, I was expecting to write this book without the pandemic and pretty much unchanged. Of course, I had to tidy up the book after the pandemic accelerated in order to include a few chapters and provide some historic context on how pandemics impact societies. But my basic thesis of the book did not change. So these problems predate the pandemic, but I think COVID-19 will be an accelerator of problems for Asia. And, I think the policymakers are very smart. So I'm not anywhere in the book making the case that policymakers are unaware of these challenges. But the magnitude of with COVID-19 and its after effects, and dealing with the social, economic, and political challenges that come with it, I think the next 5 years, we really have to watch very closely at how developing Asia is going to deal with these challenges. So, in the book, I described 8 challenges that the region faces, and I'll just go through very quickly what those 8 challenges are. Then I want to pause, take a few questions before I go again and complete the thesis of my book. Glenn, is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah, just a reminder. So if you guys have any questions, to post it on the chat group or to raise your hands.
Excellent. How much time do I have, Glenn? I know you're a good timekeeper.
We are good. You still have another half an hour to 40 minutes. We've got some a little bit excess time. Yep.
Okay. Right. So I described developing Asia's problems as 8 circles of hell. Anyone who's read Dante or heard of Dante's Inferno, I draw that as an inspiration, mainly because, the time that I spent away from the 5-star hotels, away from the business bay and the business districts of Asia, and really speaking to ordinary people, your trishaw driver, owners of small businesses in shanty towns across Asia, you get a very different sense of what their challenges are and what their hopes and aspirations are. So my 8 challenges, which I'm just going to go through very quickly. First one is politics. And I describe the problem of politics in Asia as it's an old man's game. There are too many old men running politics in Asia. And if you do analysis of the date of birth of Asian heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, majority of them, they're born in the radio and telegraph era in the 1940s and 1950s. In fact, you had this incredible sight in Malaysia before Mahathir resigned, that you actually had a prime minister who was 92 years old and was still running the country. Now, the youngest head of state in Asia is Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And I think that says a lot. That says a lot that Asian political class has been unable to renew and pass on power to a newer, younger generation of political leaders, right? And the problem, one problem is structural. For example, in China, you'll never be able to become president if you have not been party secretary in at least 2 provinces, served on the Politburo, and held, possibly held 1 or 2 ministerial responsibilities. By the time you finish all of this, you're already 58 or 60 years old. And you're president for 2 terms, which means that you become 70. And I don't want to, I myself, I'm in my early 60s, right? So this is not a criticism against old people. Just wanted to be clear of that. But if you look at the demographics of Asia, it is skewing younger and younger, right? So you can be Jack Ma and age 31, set up Alibaba, but you'll have to wait until you're at least 60 in China in order to become president. Similarly, you can be, founders of Gojek, Nadiem Makarim was also in his early 30s. For a long period of time before Jokowi, all of Indonesia's presidents were really in their mid-60s and late 70s. So there's a generation gap between the ruler and the ruled in Asia, which is a problem because technology is really transforming business. We are living through an incredibly transformative age in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of automation. And I think young people's aspirations are very, very different from the thinking of this older generation of leaders. So what you need really is, don't need a revolution. That's not what I'm calling for. But developing Asia needs to develop a process of political renewal. So you have younger leaders who are able to rise. And I think Jokowi is a good example of that in Indonesia, and hopefully that can be sustained. But you certainly should not have a situation where a very healthy, a very good-spirited Mahathir Mohamad feels compelled at age 91 that the situation in Malaysia is so bad that he had to return to politics in order to fix the problems, right? So this is really a failing of the political class as a whole across Asia in not being able to make room for younger political leaders to rise. So the question is, if you can be a tech entrepreneur when you're 30 years old, why can't you become a political leader when you're 30? And this is a real problem for Asia. And I obviously follow Singapore very closely, and the fact that Singapore is really focused on bringing a newer generation into political leadership is probably a lesson for other countries in the region to do the same thing, to really focus on political transition and not take that lightly. The second circle of hell, where I talk a little bit about what I just described, the middle class trap, that, if you're not able to move up the income ladder in your generation, what are you going to be leaving your children with? What kind of opportunities you're going to be leaving behind with your children? And I get frustrated a lot when I read about developing Asia's middle class. If you believe all these statistics, developing Asia already has 700 million to 1 billion middle class. And that's a completely fictitious number, because if you actually do a little bit of analysis of who is a middle class person in Shanghai, who's a middle class person in Jakarta, who's a middle class person in New Delhi or Mumbai, varies very widely depending on the income that they have and their consumption levels. And the ADB has done some very interesting work here on looking at consumption levels of which vary very sharply across countries. And you come to the conclusion that majority of so-called middle class in developing Asia are actually low middle class. They're an aspirational class who want to make it up to middle income status, who really want to be able to own a home, to be able to buy luxuries, to own a car, and to educate their children. And that transition from lower middle class to higher middle class to middle class is becoming much, much more difficult in Asia. And this is something I think manifests itself with rising inequality. It manifests itself with growing social unrest. The fact that you had in India before the pandemic these protests from farmers, mainly from rich farmers, is a sign that they feel that their privileges are being taken away, and they're going to be their income opportunity is going to be reduced. And I'm not necessarily advocating on behalf of the farmers. I think India needs significant farm reforms, but at the same time, it shows that it takes very, very little in order to ignite social protest in Asia today. And this is something that the policymakers should definitely be watching out for. The third circle of hell, very controversial. It has already been criticized by many people, but I say that Asia's billionaires are really beginning to become a problem. There was a time, so I'm not against entrepreneurship. I'm completely for private enterprise. I'm not a Marxist by any means. But let me just place a simple statistic before you. Asia has more billionaires than anywhere else on earth. So how is it possible that in developing Asia, it's easy for you to become a billionaire and more difficult for a low-income person to make ends meet? So how do you square this contradiction that you have these 1,147 billionaires, single largest contingent of them from China, and of course, that number increases if you include Hong Kong. And at the same time, you have protests in Hong Kong. You have protests in Thailand. So there's something wrong in the incentive structure, which allows this very powerful business class to rise. And when you've got this social mobility stalling. And usually when you've got these two pieces of evidence of rise of the billionaire class, who are very close to politicians, who are really dictating economic and political policy in countries. And at the same time, you've got this lower middle class, which is anxious and angry about economic opportunity. Usually the end outcome is not good. It's widespread social unrest, even could lead to revolution. So we really need to revisit this notion of what is the role of the business community, particularly the billionaires, who have all the influence, unlike many of the small businesses which are on this call. And how do you set that right incentive structure where it is still possible for billionaires to thrive, but at the same time you're ensuring social mobility in Asia, which happens, So I cite the example in the book of Korea, of a country really whose example we should avoid, because Korea has, as you know, the chaebol, 27 absolutely fabulous, wealthy, influential business houses, which have dominated the country's economy, many of it for the good, for the last 5 decades. But it is virtually impossible in Korea today to be a small entrepreneur and aspire to become the next Hyundai or the next Samsung. The barriers are just so high that many people simply give up, right? So you don't want to live in that economy. You don't want to be in a chaebol-ized Asia where you've got entrenched billionaire class, but new entrepreneurs are not getting access to capital. They're not getting favorable policies from the government in order to grow their businesses. So you need both. You need very active entrepreneurship, which will allow for the rise of tomorrow's billionaires, but at the same time, make sure that the billionaires are not subverting public policy. The other topic I discussed is something that you are very familiar with, of course, migration and labor migrants, which are across Asia. I describe them as urban cowboys and urban cowgirls, mainly because many of them come into countries to work in construction, to work as domestic workers. They're dislocated from their families for the long period of time. So they're essentially single, working in an alien environment. Even in countries like China and India, you've got a very large pool of domestic migrants. In China, they're called dispatch workers. There are hundreds of millions of them. They don't get residency rights to live in Beijing or Shanghai, and mainly because of their status, legal status, they don't get the jobs and the benefits that they deserve. But the problem is, Asia's urban cowboys and cowgirls are 400, 500 million strong. And I think this pandemic has shown the vulnerabilities they face, both from public health pandemics as well as, income support. Many construction businesses in Asia have had to shut down because of the pandemic. So many people are in distress. So this is an opportunity, I think, for governments, for the private sector to play a role in really helping these migrants with saving solutions, in governments to come up with sensible social policies. And certainly, the big countries, I think China, India, Indonesia, certainly India and Indonesia, which are an exporter of migrant labor, have a responsibility, I think, to ensure that the hundreds of millions of people who go out and labor away, they face a better future. And that's a challenge for Asia. I think really this is a startling statistic that there are hundreds of millions of them. And if their needs are not addressed, you're going to once again have unrest. A few other issues that are discussed in the book, and I'm conscious about time. I also want to pause and take some questions. Talk about the environmental destruction that we're seeing across Asia. Now, Asia is the single largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions anywhere in the world. So we are the region which generates the most carbon, which we put into the atmosphere. Arguably, much of this carbon comes from China. China has got a very big chunk of this. But even if you strip away China, I think Asia faces an environmental crisis. And we're seeing this already through air pollution. I don't have to tell you, living in Singapore, the problems that you face almost every year from forest fires in Indonesia, the haze that, when I lived in Jakarta, the most incredible sight was, the haze problem only impacted Singapore and Malaysia. If you sat in Jakarta, you never saw the haze. This is given the large size of Indonesia and the way winds blow. So people in Jakarta never understood what the big fuss was of Singaporeans and Malaysians complaining about the haze. And of course, it has now become a global problem because Indonesia, through its deforestation, is contributing to global warming. Right? So environmental destruction cannot be put away. You're seeing more flooding happening in Southeast Asia. So there's an interesting interplay. South Asia and India's problems is rising temperatures, which is really leading to increased migration from rural areas to urban areas. In Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia and Vietnam and Cambodia, the problem of global warming is coming through increased flooding every year. And that's probably the main reason why Indonesia wants to move the capital from Jakarta to Kalimantan, mainly because every year Indonesia faces the spectacle, and I don't know how many of you have been to Jakarta during the rainy season. You've got the business district essentially completely underwater most of the time. And this has a lot to do with climate change. And there are many sinking cities in Southeast Asia. Jakarta is not the only one. Ho Chi Minh city, Bangkok are the other ones which face the same challenges. Again, I illustrate this with the view that this does not get enough attention when we talk about Asia rising and Asia shining. The other aspects that I discuss in the book, obviously gender disparity, and I do this from the perspective of disadvantaged teenage girls. This is not a Singapore problem, but it's definitely a problem in developing parts of Asia where there is gender inequality. Many young girls still don't complete school, which completely destroys their economic opportunity, their opportunity to advance in a career and to build a family, right? So this disparity is very stark, obviously in South Asia, with India as the standout nation, with really startling gender disparities. But I would argue China, because of its one-child policy, you have in China a serious, people in Beijing call it a bride shortage, but the gender ratio is so skewed towards men. And as China begins to age, in the next 20 years, it is going to be a problem. Will China then start the process of importing foreign brides for many of the men who will simply be unable to find partners, female partners in the country? So this is a social problem which is in the making. It's aggravated by aging that China is seeing at this point in time. China is going to age before it becomes completely rich. This is, no country. So China is a real dilemma here. So China has grown so much in the last 4 decades. No country in the last 3 centuries has really emerged from low-income status to middle-income status, as China has done in such a short period of time. But if you project ahead for the next 30, 40 years, China is going to age very, very rapidly. And no country in history has simultaneously aged at a rapid pace and become rich and advanced, right? So this is, I think, really a profound challenge for Chinese policymakers. And that's the reason why, if you may have seen the announcement last week on China now insisting or requesting families to have 3 children, because the one-child policy, which was introduced in 1979 under Deng Xiaoping, it was introduced over these fears that China is going to have 2 billion people in the next 30 years. Those fears did not materialize, and China is beginning to age. The final reflection in the book is on geopolitics. I don't think you can write a book on Asia today without talking about China-US tensions. I focus attention in the book on the lessons of history, and I use World War I, and I've always been fascinated with World War I, mainly because there are very striking parallels between the powers that existed in this world before World War I. That was the UK, France, Germany, Russia, and the powers that exist today in the US-China relationship. So you've got many great powers in Asia. So, you have to include Japan, you have to include Korea, you have to include India, who are tussling and trying to figure out how do you accommodate the rise of China. And that's one proximate reason why you have this new Cold War, or at least what people describe as the new Cold War between US and China. You've got trade tensions, and it's very, very clear that there's going to be no easy resolution of this. So any hope that people had that you have a new administration in Washington and there's going to be a very quick resolution of the US-China dispute, that's, I think, people are overselling that because it's very, very clear that this is a conflict. Hopefully, it's a rhetorical conflict, not a real conflict. This is going to be with us. This is here to stay. And the steps that all countries in Asia take from now on will either aggravate the crisis. Obviously, US and China are the two countries which are the big determinants on whether there will be a conflict or not in our lifetime. But the lessons of World War I are very useful because they really show that miscommunication, egos of the big powers that existed in the world before 1914, that was the major reason why the world stumbled into World War I. And we want to be sure that as the US-China conflict or competition accelerates over the next decade, it does not lead to a very damaging conflict, which really will be the end of Asia as we know it. So on this sobering note, Glenn, I want to pause, and I'm sure there are many, many questions and challenges. So I want to give an opportunity to the floor to ask me that rather than me rambling on.
Right, thanks a lot, Vasuki. I think, does anyone have a question directly that they would like to speak up and turn on their mics? At this point, you can just turn on your mics. If not, Vasuki, there are also some questions in the chat group. I think you may have seen a few. Sun Hawk, are you still there? Was there a question in your statement? You said running a business is very different from running a country. It is in the former, it's all about entrepreneurship. So youthfulness and technology assets and being technology savvy are assets, while running a country, for the latter, it's about wisdom and experience. The ideal model must be sort of a clever combination of both going forward, especially with the onslaught of digitization.
Glenn, I'm still here. Thanking for raising. I was just, making a comment based on what I heard from Vasuki. My point is, it doesn't matter, who is running the country, be it, somebody old or somebody young, right? Going forward, I think it is, both categories of capable people recognizing that they are not mutually exclusive. But going forward, there is that strong interdependency, right? I mean, the reality is that if you look at Asian countries, even though they have a lot of senior people at the leadership level, I mean, reality, the countries are doing reasonably well, right? So, of course, the challenges are how do you have more social equality, all right, job opportunities, achieving the outcomes that many of the countries would want to achieve. For example, with more educated people, how to create opportunities. I think at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with the government. They have to do what is necessary.
At the same time, I think since you're on this point about youth and youth leadership, maybe I can dovetail together with Charlie's question that he brings up subsequently. Charlie raised, hi Vasuki, thanks for your excellent insight. How do you see the fourth industrial revolution, automation, robotics, factories, impact the future and stability of ASEAN countries and governments, given that it is likely to further widen the income gap? Charlie, do you have anything sort of to add to that statement?
That is something that is kind of worrying for me because you have this backshoring back to the perhaps to the West or developed countries because it's all robotic driven. So as well as many of the lower end jobs could be automated. So I'm quite concerned about the ladder of development being pulled up and the more emerging economies missing the chance of what China went through.
Vasuki, would you like to?
So do you want me to take this?
Yes.
Sure. Thank you. I mean, on the first question, I mean, I don't disagree. During an earlier generation, I think Asia's political leaders, regardless of their age and their background. I think we're able to deliver, we're able to listen to what happens on the street. We're able to, formulate their national policies in such a way that it boosted inclusive growth. But the overwhelming evidence, so this is really, this is not a point of view or an opinion, but the overwhelming economic evidence across developing Asia is there's a huge divide. There's a huge wealth divide. There's a huge demographic divide between the ruler and the ruled. And the fact that you've got qualified people in Thailand who protested before the pandemic, really questioning one of the most sacred aspects of Thailand society. They question the monarchy, the role of the monarchy. Really shows, really gives a sneak preview of what happens when you don't offer economic opportunity and you don't focus on inclusive growth. And you also have a ruling class, which in certain cases, maybe in other cases, the ruling class is completely attuned to the views of younger people. And the point about getting younger generation political leaders is grooming them in politics. It's not, my point was not to get Jack Ma to become president of China. My point is, do you have a renewal process within political systems across Asia, which allows for training and grooming of younger people? And I would say with the exception of Singapore, the answer is probably no. And if you've got a great deal of them, if you look at the evidence of a great deal of number of qualified college graduates who are not able to find jobs, that's a toxic combination. On, fourth industrial revolution, automation and robotics, there's certain things one has to worry about. So I make the point in the book that, we are nowhere close to what people would call artificial general intelligence, right? So we are nowhere close to the situation where the machines have taken over. They've taken over our jobs, have taken over our lives on a mass scale, right? So that is probably a multi-decade program where increased automation, increased sophistication, and artificial intelligence will lead to dislocation of jobs on a big scale. But the thing is, really, we have the time now. And to the point that Charlie made about, low wage, low capital intensive professions, which really getting impacted. Let me cite two examples where I am worried about. One is certainly in construction. The construction technology now is sufficiently advanced that you're able to replace manual labor on the job site. Gradually, many tasks that were carried out by manual labor is getting automated. And you need higher skilled professionals managing teams and managing the systems on the construction site than your traditional worker who comes in from Bangladesh or India. So this is one space to watch out for, because developing countries will soon realize that their migrant populations are not able to find qualified jobs. Similarly, Japan is experimenting with home care robots. And if you dig deeper into that, you'll find that they've been able to develop, and Japan really needs nursing care for older people, given that it's a very aging society. And if they're able to, implement the use of robots instead of traditional home care nurses, that is again going to cause dislocation. So I think in this, policymakers now have the luxury. They probably have 10 years in order to plan and make sure that there's no mass scale disruption in the labor market as a result of automation, as a result of introduction of robotics on the shopping floor. And so, they've got to use this time wisely to ensure inclusive growth.
Right. Thanks, Vasuki. I think there's two other questions. One is from Alan and the other one is from Ashok. Probably we can sort of link them together and cover them. Alan, of course, is talking about class and leadership barriers. It's challenging the human trait of selfishness, right, and self-interest. And how do we stop that? Because we talk about billionaires, right, and ultimately it's also capitalism tends to fall under this category of selfish, being selfish as well. And then, of course, Ashok brings up the point that these 8 challenges are they different from the West, from North America and Europe, politics, whether they are wealthy, low middle income class, migration, this divides. I mean, don't they also exist in Europe and in the States as well?
Okay, do you want me to take them now?
Oh, sure. I don't know. Does Ellen or Ashok, would you like to pipe in here on your questions so that we can?
You've done a good job, Glenn. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashok. Ellen?
Okay, on the...
Okay. No, Vasuki, go ahead.
Okay, on the second question, yeah, obviously every country, every continent faces economic, political, social challenges. But my point about Asia, coming back to first principles, is we're talking about Asia as rising Asia, shining Asia, this being the Asian century, right? So we cannot take the view that every other part of the world is facing the same problem. And I would argue that the magnitude of the problem, because of the population, Asia has 4.64 billion people. Japan and the Asian tigers only account for a very small proportion of the population. And a significant portion of this 4.64 billion people are low middle class or poor. So you've got this mass population higher than in any other part of the world. So this is not a commentary on West versus East. And I think America at this point in time is probably facing its most profound political challenge it has ever faced in the last 200 plus years of its existence, right? So I just wanted to place that in context. But Asia's problems is Asia has a track record of performance, which demonstrate that in the past, it was able to overcome these problems. And my argument in the book really is, yes, one absolutely cannot deny the Asian miracle. Can there be a second Asian miracle if you've got continued inequality and stalling social mobility? And there isn't evidence from any other country in the world which says that both of these can coexist. On the first question, in the last chapter of the book, I talk about the need to renew Asian values. And I know in the 1990s, there was a big debate when East Asia was growing fast, when you had both LKY and Kishore Mahbubani, who were explaining East Asia's economic performance in the 1990s as having a lot to do with Confucian values, having a lot to do with filial piety, with the instinct that Asian families have to save money, to invest in education, to work hard, long hours, completely committed on the job. And that Asian values is kind of went away mainly because of the Asian financial crisis of 97, 98, when many people felt that it was crony capitalism rather than Asian values, which was the cause of Asia's problems at that time. And many of the people who are attacking Asia, and this really proves that history has a way of catching up, were people from Europe and the US who were attacking Asia at that time, saying these values are all not relevant. But what we are seeing today in Europe and the US is a renewed debate on values. And that is why I've made a proposal in the book, which I hope you can read, on a new set of inclusive Asian values that, it's too much to expect governments to follow this, but certainly if a majority of Asians try to follow universal principles and universal values, and this comes to the point on, the point made about selfishness, the point about the rapacious billionaire class. I think if you introduce strong values in societal, political conversations, then I think that leads to better social policies. So the question is extremely relevant for the region right now.
Right. Thank you, Vasuki. I think that was a wonderful response, and I so sort of so agree with you on this part about ASEAN values, and something that I think it's something that we should hold on dearly and start to sort of inculcate into our businesses and into our lives as well, right? And then we build up opportunities. I have one last question. I think I'll also be mindful that it's 11:33. So Vinod, perhaps maybe instead of me reading out your questions, would you like to sort of pose it?
Sure. I wanted to hear from Vasuki about, in the context of what we've been speaking about, I think in some ways the evolution of Asian economies and how things have changed for the good or for the worse. My question is what your thoughts would be on the, I dare say, typical Asian phenomenon of political dynasties and cronyism, whether it is right up at the front or whether it's somebody backhanded playing puppet. Any thoughts, just general? I mean, I don't want to raise any feathers here or cause any problems.
No, thank you, Vinod. I dwell a lot in the book on, there's this persistent debate in Asia on democracies versus dictatorships. And where I come at in the book is many democracies in Asia are behaving like dictatorships, and many dictatorships in Asia are behaving like democracies. Let me explain why. So you look at the pandemic, you look at COVID-19, and I think we can reasonably conclude that the response in countries like Indonesia and India have been really pathetic. And this is, for the world to see. This is not a startling conclusion. So why is it that democracies have not been able to manage initial response, do contact tracing and testing on a mass scale, and now distribute vaccines on a mass scale? Why have they failed on all of these counts when you've got Vietnam, right? So I'm not even going to take China as an example, where you've got Vietnam, which has got a more fragile public health system compared with more developed parts of Asia. And I know they're a new cluster of infections in Vietnam recently, but by and large, they've really handled it extremely well. And one reason that one can draw from this is public trust. And I think despite Vietnam being a one-party state, despite the perception that it's dictatorship, at the same time, I think the government is very mindful and very attuned to the needs of the people, and they coordinate well. They've got better governance frameworks compared with democracies, where actually governance is supposed to work better. So the Indian economist Amartya Sen wrote, many years ago, that famines will never happen in a democracy because of the flow of information. And the flow of information will be so immense that governments will be forced to take action. This does not appear to act in the case of pandemics, where you had such a severe pandemic and spiraling infections. And governments, in democracies have really been in this very frozen state, almost in a state of paralysis, compared with, one-party states where the assumption is, it's a command and control rule, and there's no public space for debate, right? So this is an anomaly that we're seeing in Asia. Dynastic rule, wherever it happens, obviously is a problem. And I think one reason in developing Asia is why you don't have younger people go up in politics. And Jokowi is a stunning example, which disproves what I'm about to say. Is if you're 35 years old, and if you've got a choice between being a lawyer or continuing working for an investment bank, and if you look at the national politics in your country, which is completely controlled by a small group of people, with the son and daughter of the president or prime minister, has a better chance of rising compared with you, who may be well educated, but you're a political non-entity. So until the dynastic equation, and I don't have a solution on how this can ever be solved, you're not going to get young people to go into politics. And that really is a missed opportunity, because I think developing Asia needs young investment bankers, it needs young entrepreneurs. But I think in equal measure, it needs young political leaders, because the future is going to be determined by that incoming generation. It needs to be mentored and groomed, and that's not happening adequately at this point in time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vasuki. Okay, so I am mindful that it is time. I wanted to sort of quickly send a reminder to everyone to sort of, if you want to continue this conversation, you can always join our WhatsApp chat group, or you can continue our conversation on Brands for Good as we try and push this idea of actually doing good while doing well. And I think what Vasuki shared today about the problems that we face, and we can see that there are many across the region. And we are, as he also mentioned at the very beginning, in a very privileged position to do something about it sometimes, right? And no matter how small we are, and how businesses and how big or large our businesses are, as long as we have certain values and Confucian values in place, and I do sort of agree with that. I had a small an analogy that our youngest Brands for Good recipient actually gave it to share with me when he's all of 16 years old, and when I met him during the nomination process, he actually came up to me. Oh no, his mother came up to me and told me, you know why? And the mother was saying that she's not involved in the business. It's the entire 16-year-old. Why my son wanted to be in Brands for Good? He said it is because it's because of filial piety, and he feels like as a son, he has, of course, to take care of his mother. And in the same way, as a business, he is successful or has the opportunity to be successful because of society. And he therefore treats society as his mother, right? Or his business ought to treat his society as his mother, and therefore has a filial pietyness towards its obligations to society. And I think that's a nice way to sort of end off our conversation today. And I would like to thank Vasuki for the opportunity to share with us a little bit about what he's discovered on his book. Before we go off, and we haven't really finished, we do have a networking sessions in the chat groups. I would like to take this chance to take a photo, or a photo shoot. I mean, now today in WhatsApp, we all have to sort of turn on our cameras. So if I can get everyone to sort of take on the cameras and sit upright and look at the screen to make sure your head is entirely framed nicely, and then we can get my guys to sort of turn on take a snapshot, and we'll try and share that in the WhatsApp chat group as well, right? So thank you all for being a part of our conversation today, and I hope that you've sort of enjoyed it. Okay, so photo shoot. Are we all ready? Furious, are you on standby?
Okay, everybody thumbs up.
Okay, so everybody thumbs up.
Smile, 1, 2, 3. One more. Next screen. Smile, 1, 2, 3. Fantastic, done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so back to our conversation. I think we want to.
Thanks a lot, Glenn. Can I?
Oh yes.
Can I back off now?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, if you want.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shastry.
Thank you so much.
It's a very enlightening talk. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Good night for you in Washington.
Yes, good night. I thought I would quickly share the WhatsApp chat group that we have on screen, and if you can scan the QR code, you can sort of join the Brands for Good WhatsApp chat group. A quick announcement: our next event is on the 17th of June. We've got Jason, who will be sharing about market entries into ASEAN and what are the opportunities in 3 countries specifically. We're going to do 2 parts here because we're going to try and cover the business opportunities in this area. And then, of course, last but not least, to share a little bit about Brands for Good, nominations again is once open, and do come and join us when you can. Right. So is Sansan, are you still there, Marcus?
Still here?
Oh, great, wonderful. Okay, so maybe I think we can break out into breakout rooms shortly, so that we can sort of do some networking. But maybe we'll get you to share a little bit about Sansan, and before we go into our breakout rooms.
Sure, no problem. So great session, Glenn and team. Thank you so much for today. As you may know, Sansan is actually a contact management system. We have been in operation since 2007 in Japan, but we actually ventured into the global market about 3 years ago. So now we are here in Singapore and really getting very good traction in terms of demand for our solutions. And we have over 7,000 plus global customers who have actually are using Sansan daily to benefit in terms of productivity and remote collaboration. And especially during this pandemic, we are actually offering Sansan virtual cards as a very key requirement for our customers and also our companies, SMEs included in Singapore, to really work very productively in this situation. So if you can actually see my QR code here, you can actually, not only for myself, but for my colleagues, Conrad, Mandy, and Michelle as well. You can see our QR codes on the top left-hand corner of the screen, or rather top right-hand corner of the screen. You can just scan our QR code and that will take you to our virtual cards. So please feel free to approach any of us to find out more about our solutions. Yeah. Thanks, Glenn.
All right. So thank you, Sansan, for sharing and about our networking process as well. So really, it's a great chance for you to sort of stay in touch and meet some good folks. Firas, if you think, I think we've got like 30 of us, we can go into 2 different rooms, and if you can split us up, then we can sort of have a quick opportunity to do some sharing. Alan, you still there? Oh, I see people are jumping out very quickly.